Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the British Columbia Museums Association webinar. My name is Lorinda Calvert, and I will be your host for today. Today's webinar topic is Digitization, Do It Right, Do It Once, which is presented by Rod McLeod and Walter Borchenko of B3K. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that as an organization of provincial scope, the BCMA recognizes that its members, today's presenters, and attendees occupy the lands and territories of BC's and Canada's Indigenous peoples. We ask all of you to reflect on the places where you reside and work and to respect the diversity of cultures and experiences that form its richness. As I mentioned, I'm Lorinda Calvert, your host for today. I'm also BCMA's Programs Coordinator. My pronouns are she, her, and I want to thank you for joining us today. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please do email our office. Vanessa, our operations manager, is standing by to assist. A little bit of housekeeping before we begin. Please use the chat feature to ask questions or make comments. I will read your comments or questions out to our host. There'll be time at the end of the presentation reserved for Q&A. The chat feature at the bottom of your screen may be hidden. So if you hold your mouse at the top or bottom of your screen, the task menu should emerge, and that's where you can type your questions. In an effort to improve accessibility, there is a live transcription service available. You should see a closed caption button in that taskbar where the chat and Q&A is. If you click on that, you'll have live transcription service. If you don't see the closed caption button, but do see a live on Otter AI live notes in the top left-hand corner of this window, a separate website will open in your browser. As with many things this year, this is a new service to us, and we are testing it out, so we appreciate any feedback you have on it. This month's presenters are Rod McLeod and Walter Borchenko from B3K, and I'm going to pass it over to you, Rod.
Thank you, Lorinda. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. You'll definitely see that we are masked up today, and Toronto, where we are sitting, is certainly in a full lockdown situation, so we're trying to be respectful of that and careful on what we do here. We have a couple of things. First of all, I wanted to say thank you to Lorinda and Abigail and the whole team at the BCMA for all your help in getting this started. We've certainly found it to be a pleasurable experience thus far, and we hope we can get some great information to you today. We also wanted to acknowledge, before we go too much further, that today's meeting, based here in Toronto for us, is on the traditional territories of the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people, and also that we are under the coverage of Treaty 13 with the Mississauga of the Credits. So again, we are here today in Toronto. I would like to introduce Walter Borchenko, who is the co-founder of B3K, along with Kim Kaiser. We've been working in cultural heritage together for the last few years, but certainly Walter has been in this area and in digital since 1999. And because of our current situation, we thought we'd pull out a tape measure and make sure that we're going.
We might as well address the gorilla in the room, so to speak, the 10-ton gorilla. And we're measuring out 6 feet, so we can
6
see
feet back now,
where Rod needs to be. So now I can drop my mask and kind of address some of the things that I have to bring forward. So we're moving into our 12th year as B3K. We're very happy to work with probably one of the most experienced teams in the industry. Our group of respected professionals have enormous amount of experience, and what you can see running to my right is a video of our facilities here in Toronto. It's about 5,000 square feet, and you'll notice it's really not a retail store. We're a solution house. We have quite a range of different tools, and part of the challenge that we're going to throw out to you guys is that we test things. We prove that different things work. Our history has been with lighting and top-level products like Broncolor, Hensel, house product, Filux Dado, a lot of grip equipment, ceiling track systems, all kinds of studio stands and furniture. Cambo Arca Swiss are also products we bring into Canada. We handle the Kaiser Phototechnic product line out of Germany. ISO monitors we bring in. We, of course, our key product here is Phase 1. And this includes the photo drone, industrial, medical tools, and of course, what we're here to talk today about, which is cultural heritage. We also cover a wide range of just about everything in the industry, but our whole group is set up so that we're really talking about solutions when people come into us. We're not here to sell whatever a salesperson might make the most money on. We're here to choose the right tools for the job. And our history, what we started to understand as we did more and more installation is the right tools, good tools, tools that work and don't fail under pressure. They're things you never have to make an excuse for. And the right tools ended up saving time. They ended up being a very small part of the total picture, because all the work that went into producing a photograph, producing a collection of cultural heritage digitizations, all the hardware, is such a tiny part. It's the facilities, all the staff, all the work. When you've got all these costs, which end up being everything but the equipment, it makes sense to use the best tools to record what's happened. Now, as we've gotten to know more and more institutions across the country, and we've talked to groups that have been digitizing for the last 20 years, we've found that there are many institutions that have taken the same collection and digitized it 7 times. You know, I need to remind everyone that this pandemic is also an opportunity for us to rethink where we're going, what we're doing, what we take responsibility for. And these types of decisions that we're making today are also at the beginning of a completely new epoch you could consider as 5G rolls out. We're used to certain speeds with our computers and stuff when we're tethered to an Ethernet connection, or we're working with our wireless at home. Now imagine that everything you do, your cell phone, everything is running at these levels. All of a sudden, the needs of digitization, the needs of imaging far surpass anything the printing industry ever needed. And we now need quality at an unprecedented level. This quality also is part of some of the decisions happening in institutions with interactive video walls, and now more and more with fed material that can be streamed directly to an iPad or Android device. And as all these technologies become second nature to us, the quality of what we produce becomes critically more and more important. The whole point of this process is to understand that the decisions made about total costs sometimes are caught up in the minutiae, and a single item might seem like a great place to say, but when that item is the nail that's lost, that loses the kingdom, it becomes a questionable act. And that's really what we're here to talk about today. And I'm going to pass it on to Rod. This is what leads us into do it right and do it once. All right.
Thank you, Walter. I'll remove my mask as well. And we are really talking today about digitization as a whole, but really trying to put together a philosophy of do it right and do it once. And some of you may have seen that already. We're thinking of trademarking that if we have to, but I don't think you'll see t-shirts anytime soon. But what we're talking about here is the idea of actually digitizing with a proper plan and making sure that the results that you achieve are achievable again and again and again. What are we talking about when we talk about do it right, do it once? One of the first points really is that we're digitizing at the highest quality level possible. There are many tools for digitization, and I know some of your institutions there may be already or have done be scanning with flatbed scanners, smaller DSLRs, all of that sort of thing. What we really see as highest quality level for us is medium format digital cameras, and the files and the software that that mates with our phase 1 cameras really are producing that highest quality level digitization. You're going to hear a lot today about a standards-based digital surrogate, and really what we're talking about we'll get into a little bit further on in terms of which standards we're dealing with. But the overall process for us is digitizing at that highest level, creating that standard-based digital surrogate, and using the software which provides lots of workflow process automation. In other words, things that are going to make your job easier as you are digitizing and improve your productivity and save your costs. Really, the production and the storage all become a much easier thing to deal with this method. And if we're talking about it, really it's a building for the future while saving costs. And if we talk about what are we looking at in terms of digitization, we really have three pillars that we work from. And again, this raw digitization workflow, capturing in raw, being able to use that as your main file, not having to capture for all of the other formats that you might need, all can be presented from that one raw file. Highest level standards, again, being able to check your work as you go, and again, that process automation that is coming from the software that we're working with here today. A couple of definitions as we go forward. Again, you're going to hear these all the way through this presentation today. One of them being the digital surrogate. What are we actually talking about when we talk about a digital surrogate? Really what we're talking about is a non-custodial image that is a faithful reproduction of the original item that you have digitized. As we talked about with valued items that we have and that we're digitizing, we don't necessarily want to be bringing those out every day and touching them. Researchers coming into the institution don't necessarily need to be able to pick up that book or pick up that document. What we're able to do here with a raw and a standards-based digital surrogate is actually give you perhaps even more detail than you might have when holding that particular item in your hand, in terms of detail that's possible. With a proper digital surrogate on a document, for instance, we can go in 200, 300% to that document and really see where the paper that it was printed on, and really starts to bring about a value to that digital surrogate itself. I've included on the slide here a little bit of a definition from the Library of Congress, and there's just a couple of interesting points that really are what they feel about digital surrogate. And just so you know, this isn't a term that we're bandying around a little bit, but the idea that really this is a respected institution and this is how they deal with digital surrogates. A couple of those lines: create a digital version of items according to preservation standards. So the idea that, again, we're doing something with a standard in mind. Provide reliable copies to Congress, registered readers, researchers, and other users. And really the most important point for me at the end, the digital surrogates resulting from the projects are considered to be part of the library's digital collections. So again, there's some importance that is really attached to that digital surrogate. The other definition that you're going to hear a lot today, or the other term, is raw, and the idea of what is a raw file. A raw file is produced natively by the digital back that we're talking about. It is a complete file in that it captures all of the pixel information, any changes that you'd made prior to capturing that file, and all the metadata is all going to be included in that raw file. It's not changed in production, and it's certainly not affected by operator or manufacturer bias. So if your digitizer is actually thinking it should be lighter or darker, we have standards again that will make sure that they have that proper connection and that proper digitization. But really, it's the highest degree of control that gives you the option to create a preservation digital asset. So let's dive into the workflow a little bit. What we're actually saying here with a digitization workflow is we're creating one raw file. And the beauty of that from an institution's point of view is that that one raw capture has a digital surrogate quality to it. It is the only object that is saved, and it is the only object that the institution actually has to archive and manage, as opposed to digitizing from a point of view of so-and-so needs a JPEG, this institution requires a PDF, and saving those in your workflow. The federal government last year and for the previous 2 years mandated a 25% reduction in storage throughout federal institutions. A lot of institutions that had digitized, say from the beginning of digitization, really had massive files, JPEGs, TIFFs, PDFs, all stored under that one image name. The ability to capture in RAW means that you do not have to go that way. It is capable of all the output demands required in terms of PDFs, JPEGs, PSD files, whatever is required, they can all be produced from that one RAW file.
Should we show an image? Should we kind of...
Yeah, that's probably a great idea.
I'm going to come in now, so you want to...
I'm going to mask up.
Mask back up. One of the things we talk about is the fact that these files are a little bit like science fiction. what you're seeing here is 50 megapixels. This is 1/3 of 150 megapixel capture, printed at 120 inches, where you can walk right up to it a few inches away and it's perfectly sharp. This has been output with no output sharpening. It has no manipulation or adjustment. This is the image as it's captured. And this is done on a desktop 24-inch printer. So this is anybody can produce this. Now, we essentially have, with this type of technology, achieved a new paradigm where this digital surrogate can truly represent everything that you might need. Largest prints we're aware of in terms of scaling these up and doing them are approximately 100 feet. So one file should really, really cover every possible need that someone might come across.
Excellent, yeah.
You can take your mask off now.
Oh, I can take my mask off? You moved out of the zone?
I'm out of the zone.
And really, again, to state this point, what capturing with that raw file actually gives you is the option to start a PPI-based workflow. And that really is, I'm sure those that are digitizing now are getting requests for PPI level for that image. What we are able to say here is that, being able to digitize with a view to capturing your best file sets you up on a much better path than, again, digitizing because an institution requires a JPEG or a researcher requires a PDF file. That is a DPI-based workflow, and just to give you a quick run through, PPI is really a capture term, and I know that there is some consideration there and some confusion there that we hear back and forth. Pixels per inch really is what we're talking about versus a dot per inch, which is an output way to go. So again, that PPI-based workflow, working with a raw file, allows you to set that up. And one of the concepts that we're really talking about here is the idea of a digital object as an additional asset for your institution, your museum, your gallery. The idea that we've created a digital object, it is subject to the same management and storage display requirements that the original is. It can stand in for that original whenever needed, but it is a fixed operating cost. It's captured, it's there. If we are digitizing to a more DPI output, we certainly are increasing our fixed operating costs, and frankly, the asset value is of a questionable importance in terms of a small JPEG or a small TIFF from that point of view. In the end, putting that raw file now with our Capture One software allows you, all of those output demands are taken care of again by that one raw file. And you can print those files that you need out on demand as you go, and it's certainly an easier way, again, to make it all happen for you. The third piece in this is cameras, and again, we're talking about a medium format capture from our point of view. We're very, very proud to say that our phase 1 cameras with 150 megapixel sensors on them are able to hit that digital surrogate level right out of the box. Preservation grade is achieved, and we'll get into a little bit further on what cost savings are achieved, but they are there as well. There's a bit of a false economy when it comes to DSLRs, and really what we're talking about is that they just don't have that quality level. They do produce a raw file in a lot of cases, but not all raw files are created equally. I don't know if, Walter, if you could touch on that a little bit in terms of the differences there.
All right. Going back and forth and changing out. All right. I think a lot of times decisions are made for convenience, and we see DSLR files are created. Of course, there's limitations in resolution, optics, detail. So as, let's say, an interactive digital wall comes in, as a higher level of internet requirement comes in, all of a sudden collections are having to be redone. Now that 5G is coming into play, as more and more people understand what that's about, again, things are being redone. The bit depth of these files, the physical optics of these files are far below the specification, but the most difficult part of this is that out of the box, all of our solutions hit highest level in ISO 19264, in Fudge and metamorphosis standards. What that means is it's the same amount of work. You're pressing a button, you're getting a digitization. The work, the setup, all the work to get that object there is the same, I'm recording with an item that may or may not do everything I need. I'm recording with something that does everything I need and things I can't even imagine I need. And that's really where you start to define the difference. We have 16 plus f-stops of dynamic range in our files, and we can literally record things that digitally have not been recorded before in a single file. So with that in mind, I'll pass it back to Rod.
Thanks, Walter. And we've done a little bit of a diagram here just to really illustrate what Walter has mentioned a couple of times there, is that the main bulk of the cost in terms of digitization is really all of the things to get that item ready. So withdrawing it from where it's being stored, if it is in any way not ready to be digitized, it does need to be conserved and repaired possibly. And then you're also calculating with your facilities overhead, everything else that is required to give you a place to go to digitize. So what we're saying here is really the productivity of the Phase 1 cameras and the Capture One software are really equaling what we would say in terms of a capital cost for the equipment to consider that digitization. And the really added benefit here is that we have a much better file to deal with, and you have hit, again, those international standards straight out of the box. One of the best ways that we really illustrate the efficiency of this workflow has to do with the film digitization workflow. We've just got a little bit of video here to show you, which is really to work with our new IXG cameras and the IXH and IXG series, and our film stages from a number of manufacturers that we have. But you can see everything is custom made for this setup so that you've got film holders for all types of film. You have very easy sort of film stages to work with in terms of getting a stable and flat film. You've got all sorts of advantages in terms of a rapid flow in terms of capturing as you go. So you really have a setup that is designed for efficiency. And the idea that you can then take this and digitize, we have clients that are doing thousands of scans a day. And as you saw there, 400 times faster than a traditional scanner. But the idea that, again, you're doing quality work at the most efficient pace that you have. And really that's what we're all here for, is the way to digitize with the best efficiency and the best results at the end. We, in working with negatives, just as you're seeing there as well, the inversion is all built in. The transparency kit is one of the parts of our digitization gear, and again, anybody that is doing film, we would be more than happy to show you these. We can do Zoom demos, we can do all sorts of things if this is the kind of gear that you're dealing with. To touch a little bit again on standards, which is really the base of what we've been talking about here. There are a number of standards institutions. For us here in North America, we are really most beholden to the FAGI organization. They have a number of different ratings here, and you can see on the screen there, the FAGI is our North American. Metamorphose comes out of The Hague in Europe and deals with European institutions on that side. And of course now, as we are moving into an ISO age, there are now ISO standards being delivered for all of these. 19264 is one that is specific to film, but it is starting to cover all of the aspects as well. One of the principals and one of the board members at FAGI is Don Williams, who is a 20-plus year Kodak veteran and worked at Kodak dealing with developing targets. He has now moved to a company that he's fronting up called Image Science Associates. They produce a lot of the targets that we use for our standards-based digitization. One of the things that Don had said to me is, what FAGI does for you is give you the knowledge and tools to ask for a certain level of performance and ensure you're receiving what you get and what you paid for. So that's really, again, FAGI and Metamorphose and the ISO building these standards so that we know exactly where we are, and there is a standard that everybody can use. So again, one of the concepts we'll talk about in a little bit is the sharing of assets between institutions, and the idea that you sending your files to another institution allows, again, somebody else to look at this work, but also a bit of a safety measure for you as well, in that there is another institution that has the same imaging that you have. So using these really becomes again, a measurable level for you in terms of digitization. We mentioned Image Science Associates, and they do produce a lot of the targets that we use here. And I wanted to show you just a couple as we go. This is our device level target from Golden Thread Image Science. It gives you all sorts of readings here in terms of correct exposure, proper white balance, and really, again, a measurable stance for you.
Optical performance.
And yes, an optical performance, being able to measure in terms of focusing and where you are. And this is our object level targets, which again can be placed with any of the objects as you're digitizing. Comes in a nice set and is really, again, helping with that resolution and that proper standards-based digitization. Again, to come back for a standards digitization workflow and the cameras that we are using, again, the medium format offerings from phase 1. We have 2 really that we are featuring. The flagship from the range is the IXG and IXH. They really are developed into the software as a closed loop operation, so that, again, auto PPI is set up and is working throughout this setup. In terms of resolution, these are both 150 megapixel cameras. The beauty of the XF and the IQ, which is on the left of your screen there, is that it is a bit more of a all-round camera. The IXH, IXG are purely industrial cameras designed for a high-intensity digitization environment. The XF and IQ4 range really are great for an institution that is doing some digitization on a copy stand, but wanted to remove the camera for larger objects and perhaps even portraits within the institution, that sort of thing as well. The last piece in the standards-based digitization is talking about copy stands, and we do feature manufacturers such as Phase 1, which is our main partner in this, in terms of copy stands, film stages, book cradles. We feature products from DT, based out of New York, and Kaiser, based out of Germany as well, and they offer another range of copy stands and book cradles. And Walter, can I just throw to you for a second to just talk a little bit about digital surrogates and their value in terms of an environment that is not as safe as we would like?
Well, I think part of our time of reckoning is to also appreciate that our time on this planet, we have changed the environment. There are a lot of arguments that might be had out there, but looking at the kind of flooding and the kind of destruction that's happening around the globe, we're reaching another milestone of sorts, where digital objects that we have today in some cases are the only thing that remain of many, many collections. We have a colleague working in the UK who got involved in a project in the Middle East where a cache of artwork was found. It had been stolen and left in the desert in a bunker of sorts. A team was flown in who digitized this right there, right where it was. They digitized as much as they could before the fighting got a little bit difficult. Once they got out of there, the whole area got blown up. And so all those objects, many of them scrolls and things, were completely lost. And so these types of things are what we might think of, but how about a flood that happens along the St. Lawrence River? What about, collections that are damaged by fire? What about all those other aspects that are sometimes hard to understand? We have political upheaval in Canada. We wouldn't think we do, yet we're aware of a collection of stuff out in one of the research laboratories that's really a test farm for the federal government. It's out in Alberta, and almost 25 years of older film records were destroyed because the budgeting for keeping them was removed. So, what we face today is a very unusual political climate, and as people who are involved in digitization and carrying forward to future generations the materials that we've collected, it behooves us to make sure that those objects are well recorded, because those records very much in time will become the only thing left. Now, from that standpoint, we have some issues that come up in standards where somebody's working with a DSLR and with some manipulation, they can hit the highest levels, but the image doesn't look like the object at all. What we're talking about here is out of the box, we have solutions where the image looks terrific. The actual digitization is going beyond what you could do with your eye. To be able to see the fibers of paper at the individual fiber level, you need a microscope. We have some digitization projects where very small insects were digitized, and it turned out when they zoomed them up to maximum resolution, they found out that there were aphids growing in the joints that you'd only normally see with an electron microscope. So what you have in a digital object is something that is a completely new object. It's an object that has the capabilities of a microscope image. It has the capabilities that researchers can use, and yet at the same time, it can be a low resolution thumbnail on the internet. You know, so it's a completely different arrangement. I'm going to pass it back to you.
Yes. Thank you, Walter. And again, the final point on that really is the idea of once that digital surrogate has been created, it can be shared with other institutions. And for any institutions that are either losing funding or are facing floods or facing any sort of natural disaster that might affect their computer networks, affect their storage facilities, we are seeing it all across Europe now. We're starting to see it in North America. The idea of being able to share that digital surrogate with another institution really sets about, again, not only more publicity for your own materials, but the idea that there is that sort of protection as well, that it is in another location for you. So we mentioned process automation, and as difficult as that is, I'm just going to remove my mask so we might be able to hear me a little better. Part of the software aspect of what we're dealing with here is the idea of making a digitization process run smoothly and be more efficient. One of the features of this setup, and again I mentioned this closed loop setup with the Phase 1 IXH, is auto column and auto PPI. One of the big time wasters, I'm going to call it, in terms of a digitization process is the idea of a management decision deciding this is the PPI that we need this digitized at, and now the operator actually having to find that PPI, and through exhaustive tests, and we've seen all sorts of materials, chains hanging from the camera, all sorts of things to be able to get you to what we would call a reasonable PPI for that image, is now taken over and completely automated, and it is simply a matter of pushing a button. We've auto column, and it is in a closed loop system with the IXG and the IXH cameras, and they adjust everything as you go, so you literally key in the PPI that you're looking for, and that's going to take the camera to the level with the lens on that you have to achieve that PPI. You can then set your resolution to that level, and away you go. You're set up and starting. And it is, again, all of the techniques and all of the things that we developed to find that PPI are now, you can sweep them aside, and again, within a couple of minutes, you've set your PPI and you're digitizing away. The next automation that I wanted to highlight for you is auto crop. So again, once you have digitized a number of items, they do need to be cropped and tidied up. And again, that was a process that would add many, many minutes onto each image as you got the right crop and made sure that everything was done with your auto levels and your rotations. Now, again, that is an automated process for you, and again, the IXG and IXH are going to be able to do that straight away, as well as the IQ4. We've just got a little bit of a demonstration here, but the idea that we've gone through and captured envelopes that are as part of a collection, and many operators have spent a lot of time making sure that as you place those on and started to digitize those, that there was perhaps an outline that you could fit into so that everyone got captured straight. And when you're using a scanner, that sometimes your paper gets skewed. and you have a slightly different angle for an image, which obviously is going to be off-putting when you're going through a whole collection. The beauty of this now is that we can almost toss them down onto the copy service. We can digitize them, and now the machine and the software are going to be able to take care of that cropping exercise for you. So again, it will crop to wherever you need it to be in terms of that object. You can add in padding. You can add in all sorts of techniques as you go. But seriously, the digitization itself has not taken you any longer. But now the auto cropping is taking care of all of that for you. And I've just grabbed a picture here of the foot pedal, and it is really central to the operation in terms of digitizing. You can see on the, I guess, your right side, the auto crop window is up, and that can also be done on capture or on crop. So as you're going through, you can decide whether or not you want that cropped as you're capturing it or later as a batch crop. The foot pedal is allowing you then that quick and easy access. You can stand in front of a monitor and digitize while that's going through. We've just done a little bit of a preview here for you so that you can see a little bit of that process. But using our film process, we have set up 6 slides in the slide holders and now are being digitized by the foot pedal. And then you see on the right-hand side of the screen that it is popping up in terms of the image that has been captured. Capture resolution ruler is the next one. Again, when we're trying to determine what resolution we're shooting at and how we're going to be able to make sure that that is repeatable, we have a little tool within Capture One that allows us to measure that. And if you are able to place your target down, and this is the device level that I showed you before, you are now able to zoom into a measurement mark on that target, set your resolution ruler to cover that, and you can see on the side there, you can set what measurement you determine. In this case, we picked an inch, and you can draw that resolution across now. And it then, once it's set, gives you the PPI and the resolution that you're working with there. So a great time saver again for now I know I've exposed properly, I've done my color balance properly, and I now have my resolution that I want to be capturing at. Part of the Capture One environment as well in this automation is setting up styles. And this is a great way, again, with film or any other objects that you're digitizing, you can actually pre-pick how you want to digitize. In this case, we picked black and white negative film to be scanning, and that has opened up a window of options for us to be able to go through and set those all up. But as you can see in the window there, we're able to select, excuse me.
Rod, can I interject here for
Absolutely.
a second? I think that one of the things a lot of people don't understand today, especially if you've been at this for a while, is how do we deal with the fact that the films that were made, we've no longer got reference film for them. There was a time where there was a whole industry of companies taking all the different films, photographing test targets. Those test targets were used to set up scanners and to create the best possible output. This was particularly important on the negative side. Phase One has a long history. Phase One invented what eventually became the Imocon scanner. What they've done in the cultural heritage solutions you see here today is they advanced that technology, and they came up with a conclusion that negative film, the same exact emulsion between, let's say, somewhere in the tropics and somewhere in, let's say, Alaska or in the Yukon, the temperature differences in the chemistry, the way the film was processed, there could be a 2 or 3 stop difference in base density. And yet, all of those will produce a reasonable print. So they had to come up with some algorithms to correct for that, and they've done so. We can automate those, and we set those up in these styles that you see here, but we also have the ability to have this process that analyzes the film applied to each individual frame as we take the frame, which adds a whole higher level of automation, where many groups are spending a lot of time fixing the files and trying to make them look right. We get there automatically, and we get there very quickly. Still might need a bit of adjustment now and again, but now we're dealing with correcting cross curves, and we have all the tools for that as well.
Absolutely. And I guess, Walter, we're really at the stage of talking a little bit about what things we may have coming up.
Ah, yes.
And I think one of them is really the possibility of proper multispectral imaging as we go forward. And I think we're masked, so we can sort of be in that same frame, but
multispectral is fascinating. It's one of the areas I'm very excited about. We've had a multispectral system that Phase 1's been delivering for the last year that's still in the research stages. Come March of next year, we're expecting to have the next generation of the multispectral system released. And the problem we face is that you're shooting a whole lot of images that in themselves make no sense. The reason that you can read the data, the reason you can see script and text that's behind a physically written page of papyrus or leather is the fact that different wavelengths of light are able to bring out those different elements. And then knowing how to take all these different images, apply false color, and have them show up has been a bit of a science. There's a handful of people throughout the world that have been specialists in this, and typically they've managed this. What Phase 1 has done is to say, hey, we can quantify the needs. We can see these different aspects that people are trying to show. So they've broken the system up into two. So what you see here in the next image, this is broadband. These are specific bandwidths. We also have multispectral. Multispectral uses many, many more lights, including UV light. And the combination of the two different types can pretty much cover every single type of multispectral that's out there. What's amazing is Phase 1 have built a software product that allows you to say, hey, I want to learn this about this object, and it figures out how to take all those images and give you that proper false color final result. That's the part that we're very excited about, because this means you don't have to hire a scientist to come in and analyze all the images you've created. Now Capture One can hand those tools to you just as you need them. So very, very exciting.
fantastic. And that really brings us to the end of our presentation today in terms of what we wanted to show you. I believe that we have some time for questions if there is some. Before we go to that, though, I did want to touch on a couple of things in terms of questions that you may have going forward as you plan these projects, as things are starting to happen for you. We have many brochures. We have all sorts of material that we can send. Obviously, in this day and age, we do a lot by Zoom, we do a lot by telephone call, but we can certainly set things up to answer those questions. We are very used to working with institutions in terms of planning. So for those that are just getting started on digitization, we have spent a lot of time working with institutions that don't know where to start, don't know where to go from here, and advising them on how we go forward. And Walt, you had a couple of things?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. For those of you who have made commitments to the DSLR side and haven't had an opportunity to do the due diligence to understand what's the difference between these processes. We are an operating environment here. That means that everything that we do here is exactly the type of thing you're going to do in your own environment if you have the equipment. So people can send us samples, objects, film, glass plate, and we're happy to digitize those things and to provide samples so you can see how absolutely astronomical the differences are. At first, without a comparison, you think you're fine, but then you start to understand why maybe another institution doesn't want to share with you when their work has been done with one of the Phase 1 technologies. So this brings us to a second aspect, and that is a bit of a challenge. I think everybody understands that the Phase 1 technology, as a general rule, has been fairly expensive. We have solutions that range in the 400, 300, 200,000, 150,000 range. But when it comes to film scanning and some of the new solutions we have from Phase 1, we've even been able to come up with a couple of $60,000 solutions with 100 megapixel backs that can do enormous jobs with film. And it's a complete film solution. It's an auto column, it's an XF camera with a 120 macro, 100 megapixel back, the software, all those things. So anybody who's interested in that, we're going to have some materials sent out to everybody so you know how to contact us, or just go to b3kdigital.com and you can contact us through there. We're happy to discuss those things. We also have new products like this new multispectral system, which we expect to have here in Canada at some point. We're currently working with a couple institutions who are hoping since both institutions are good with sharing with other institutions, we're hoping to have some installations of the multispectral so institutions across Canada can look to these other institutions to actually do work with them or to actually be able to have access to the facilities and the multispectral capabilities. We also are happy to have a number of mentors in the establishment. We also have service bureaus that are following these. I'd like to do a shout out to John Molesky out in Delta.
Yes.
MJV Services, he's running a full spec film scanning, book scanning, art reproduction, outsourced servicing where he's supplying the raw files to the end users so they can archive these raw files, but he's also producing all the work at the highest possible level for the BC market.
And is also quite keen to come out to the institution and do that work. So he is set up to be able to trailer in onto the grounds if need be, or you can send direct to him, whatever's easiest for you as you go forward.
Going across Canada, we have other partners in other provinces, so if anyone has a question or would like to get some of this information, please reach out to us. In our do it right, do it once approach, and with the interest that everyone's now thinking about taking responsibility for the total cost of production, it's important to understand that our solutions are gauged as industrial. They're good for millions and millions of exposures, and when it comes to the per click cost, it ends up being not that much more than going to something inexpensive that has to be replaced and where work has to be redone. Now we've got some questions, right?
Yes,
so
we have the first question. Do you project any issues with technological obsolescence or inaccessibility of digital files in 25, 50, or 75 years?
Okay, so I don't mind taking this one on.
All right.
One of the things that we're quite excited about is that the EIP format, which Phase 1 uses as a container, is an ISO-based technology. More and more, Phase 1 has been releasing things so that other applications can also take these Phase 1 files, things that most of us are familiar with, like products like Photoshop and Adobe Camera Raw. There are other products out there as well that can read these files, and what's important is that going forward there is an access to the information that these products produce. I think from the standpoint of longevity, we're looking back at some 25 different camera systems where Phase 1 is representing raw processing for these formats, and many of these companies like AGFA and Minolta are no longer around, yet we're able to process those files and continue doing so. They have had an open source public aspect to what they're doing, and I think from a long-term standpoint, we're seeing compared to any other choices out there, this is offering the highest, longest window of opportunity and outlets where other companies are involved so that going forward the strategy grows. Perfect. Additional questions? I see one coming up, yes. I think.
No,
yeah, we have a
question. Yep.
We have a question here. Do you work on digitizing audio visuals currently in physical tapes?
In terms of projects that we've been involved with, we've been involved with video, audio, and many other things. We have Kyle with us, who's a specialist in many of these things. We're not addressing them as part of this particular session, but we're happy to discuss that for any of the institutions who have these types of objects to deal with. Absolutely.
Thanks. And if you could just hold on one sec, I'm just going to share my screen again for those who need a reminder on where to find the Q&A or chat button. It's in the taskbar. So if you just want to hover your mouse at the top or bottom of your screen, the taskbar should emerge and you can type your question in the chat or the Q&A if you find that one first. I'm going to just stop my screen so that we can see your faces, which is so wonderful.
Okay, so
we have another question that's come in.
There. Do you have any opinions about storing digital objects in the cloud? And let's just say that we're all at some level of dealing with these aspects like the cloud and other stuff, and they're all new, and yet, let's be honest, going forward, there will come a time when everything's going to be in the cloud. So what is it that makes a particular object accessible? If it's in the cloud, something goes wrong, somebody comes up with some crazy way to make it go crazy and disappear, what are we left with? And this is, again, where we talk about institutional sharing. We're talking to some institutions here in Canada who are working at the top level, and they're able to share with institutions in Europe. And we found that institutions in Europe are somewhat ahead of us. The vast majority of these institutions are using each other as the digital asset managers. So what's happening is they're shooting these raw files and they're saying, hey, we'll share our raw files with you, you share your raw files with us. If we're in similar, let's say, academic categories, it's increasing our research potential. It's increasing how much material we have available for our students and our faculty and for research. At the same time, I'm backing you up, you're backing me up, and we have to have all this equipment to do this anyway. Now, that might be done in conjunction with the cloud, but to do something just with the cloud, from my perspective, is risky until we understand what the long-term issues might be there. Next question is, we're a small institution with a small budget. How accessible is the equipment price-wise? Well, as I'm saying, like a good film scanning kit based on some demo gear we've put together. We have a couple of packages available in the $60K price range. If you're doing reproduction flat art, we can get it down below that. We're including the automation, the PPI, auto PPI column, where you can type in, hey, I need this 300 PPI, and it adjusts itself. I need this at 600 PPI, and it adjusts itself. All that's part of it. The other option is, if you're in a limited position and you've got a smaller collection, is you outsource it. But the outsourcing has to be done based on PPI, not DPI. It has to be done with institutions or with service bureaus who are willing to prove to you that they're producing this and give you the raw file, because that's what you need to archive. We take on some of these projects ourselves. We have partners we work with across the country, and we're happy to discuss that topic with anyone who might have issues there, has some budget, but doesn't necessarily have the money to make this work. We also find that we have a lot of volunteer work happening out there, and some of our solutions are simplified to the level where a volunteer can run it, especially if it's copy work of postcards, if it's, you know, collections of loose objects, photographs, and documentation. And that level of automation means literally they're putting it down, they're hitting a foot pedal, and they're just checking to make sure that they got the image and that their hand isn't covering part of the object. And because they're lay people, those are the kind of things you got to look out for, right?
Yeah. And I'd add in there as well that, I mean, as a company, we are very used to working with institutions. I've been working with 2 or 3 right here in Ontario over the last few weeks that are applying for some of the federally appointed grants that are available, and so are really trying to gather information before they put that grant application in. So it's been, you know, certainly something that we've done quite a lot of. We're very used to introducing some of this gear in stages too. So if you know you've got film projects, you've got book projects, and you've got loose documents, you know, we can sort of help you prioritize that, get you with the basic gear, and add those either in subsequent years or with subsequent grants, however your financing goes. But just know that we're very used to this sort of setup, and we will do everything we can to get you in the family at a budget.
Do we have any other questions? Let's see if we do.
I don't see any coming through, but maybe we'll just give folks
Either we do a
another
fantastic
moment.
job, or we completely missed the boat. One or the other.
Yes.
I think that was fantastic. We are approaching 1 o'clock, so maybe we can just take this as an opportunity to wrap up. Any final thoughts from the two of you before we wrap it up here?
Well, I think, again, we're very appreciative of this opportunity, and we're more than happy to help as people walk down this road to digitization, and I think you'll be supplied with our contact info. Even if you know you're years away from starting digitization, please contact us, and as I said, we can give you the information, we can walk you through some of the processes, and make it easy for you as you go.
Thanks, everybody. And I think that's it, right?
Yeah, I think
All
so.
right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to take over here again with my screen. There we go. I just want to thank you two so much for joining us today. I really appreciate everything you've shared with us. I also just want to commend the quality of your presentation, the masks. It was fantastic. So thank you so very much for coming and sharing with us and our community today. It's been wonderful having you. And I just have a few little pitches for folks who are here with us. Do consider joining the BCMA in December. We have some really good webinars coming up. We're starting December off with fundraising in a post-pandemic world, as well as heritage conservation, the basics and tips, and resume interviewing tips for tourism and hospitality jobs. And if you are interested in joining us in 2021 and beyond, do consider becoming a member. We have funding opportunities, webinar participation that's free for you, reduced registration fees, and access to professional development resources, and so much more. Again, Rod and Walter, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for everyone on this webinar, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thanks.